Well, the KwaZulu Natal shutdown has had a heavy impact on the funeral industry. Bodies, we're hearing, have piled up at mortuaries as they could not be transported due to the week-long unrest. Let's find out more about what's happening at the moment. We chat now to Funeral Industry Reform Association chairperson Johan Rousseau. Johan, good afternoon and thanks for your time. So we're hearing that burials have been delayed due to the rioting that we saw in KZN and parts of Gauteng. How badly have funeral services actually been affected by this, especially while you were dealing with the COVID as well and the setbacks there?
Good afternoon to you and your listeners. Yes, the funeral industry has been impacted. We've seen looting of coffins at certain funeral parlors. We've seen equipment being stolen at the cemeteries, and the funeral industry has suffered tremendous losses because they couldn't do their work effectively in serving the public.
So are you able to estimate the damage that has been caused now in the industry to funeral homes and funeral parlors? Do you have those numbers at hand?
Well, unfortunately not, because there's no statistics really readily available that guides the funeral industry, and we've been requested that from a variety of sources, for example, Stats South Africa, Health, Home Affairs, but it makes it very difficult to obtain those statistics.
So, Johan, give us an idea now of what all of this has actually resulted in. We're hearing the stories of bodies piling up. We're hearing the stories of families that aren't able to bury their loved ones. What is happening? To your knowledge, what is happening at the moment?
Well, we've had a number of discussions with our members and the broader industry. The problem arises that there's no wood readily available to manufacture coffins. There's a slow manufacturing processes going on. Home Affairs is not able to sustain the amount of deaths and giving the funeral industry the opportunity to register deaths, and that causes the result of piling up of deceased people either at your hospitals, your government mortuaries, and the funeral industry itself. We are also informed that certain funeral parlors to acquire additional mortuary facilities just to assist the public in with a large amount and increased amount of deaths in the country over the last 2 months especially.
So what's the plan then, Johan? I mean, you have to obviously start getting back on the bandwagon as soon as possible, because this is a health risk as well. Like you say, we are. When COVID is still hitting us quite hard, there's going to be more deaths. There are already, daily in the hundreds. So what's the plan now, especially after this most recent catastrophe? How do you get back into action?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to place it in front of COGTA and Health Department. We've provided them with proposals to look at creating infrastructure throughout the country in the case of certain disasters and pandemics which we find ourselves now in. We also need to look at revisit the laws which we've provided to the Law Reform Commission after the regulation and the Ombudsman has failed or has been delayed by government. And we need to place this in front of government, because I think the biggest threat to the South African public and our current systems is the lack of infrastructure and the inadequate infrastructure that exists. I don't know whether you know or whether you are aware thereof that all the storm water emanating from a funeral parlor, which has been affected with chemicals and hazardous diseases, ends up in our stormwater, which ends up in our natural resources, which is our waters, rivers and dams. And we've seen that, and we need to place this in front of political parties and political leaders to say we need to curb this problem areas immediately, because it's a disaster in the making. And it's just worsening every day, especially with COVID. People are going to a mortuary, there's not sufficient infrastructure, there's not sufficient training, there's not sufficient PPE, and ultimately this disease has just been spread because it's airborne diseases, especially when it relates to African cultures, where loved ones are dressed at a mortuary. There is not adequate facility, and government is just turning a blind eye.
All right, Johan Rousseau, we'll have to leave it there for now. Undertakers, funeral parlours still battling to play catch-up is what we hear there. But